Hi everyone, this video is part 2 of Unit 7, which covers motivation, emotion, and personality. In this video, I will cover the theories of emotion. So, to start with, emotion is really complex, and psychologists try to explain emotion through the different things that occur with emotion. As far as emotion goes, there's several components to emotion. One is a biological component. Whenever you have an emotion, whether it's before or after or during, there's typically a biological arousal, like your heart pounding or feeling the warmth inside of your body when you're angry, or fear and having this tension rise inside. There's a biological component that is a part of emotion. There's also an expressive behavior with emotion, whether that's a smile across your face, whether that's jumping out of fear or gasping, having a quickening pace. Typically, there's this expressive behavior that is also occurring with or after or during that emotional experience. And then there's also this cognitive and conscious awareness of the experience, the thought processes that are occurring, the appraisal of the situation, and just the feelings itself. And so emotion is a complex mix of all of those things, and psychologists, when discussing emotion, are trying to figure out what is emotion. Is it all of those things happening together at the same time? Does one of them come first and help you understand how you're feeling? And so what is emotion exactly? Are you afraid because your heart is racing? Are you afraid while your heart is racing? Are you afraid because you've assessed the situation and you've deemed it threatening and therefore your heart is racing? What part of that is emotion? When does emotion occur? And that explanation is different depending on the theory and the perspective that is taken. So we're going to walk through those theories. The first theory is the James Lange theory. And the James Lange theory is essentially explaining the when of emotion. When is emotion occurring? And so we have a situation on the screen. You can see that the stimulus is the sight of an oncoming car that's coming down through the middle of the road, approaching this woman. And so that is the stimulus. You can see then, according to James Lange, her heart starts to pound. The biological arousal occurs. And then she knows that she is afraid. And so according to James Lange, this theory suggests that emotion is experienced in this progression, that the stimulus causes the biological or the physiological response inside of you, like your heart racing, which then allows you to label that experience to have that emotion, emotion of fear. And I think the best way to remember the James Lange theory is to use the J and the L. And if you say to yourself, the stimulus makes you jump and then label. That helps me remember that James Lange would approach emotion by saying that the stimulus causes a biological reaction, which then therefore allows you to understand the emotion you're feeling. The next theory is the Canon-Bard theory. Now, this is approaching the same situation and then describing the emotion and when it occurs a little bit differently. So we're going to take that same situation. The car is approaching you, and that is the stimulus. So according to Canon-Bard, emotion is experienced at the same time as the biological arousal. So you can see the car is coming down the road, and the woman who is faced with this stimulus coming towards her, her heart is pounding and she's afraid at the same time. So the Canon-Bard theory suggests that emotion is experienced, it's caused by a stimulus that triggers both a biological and physiological response at the same time as the emotion. They occur together. They're one and the same. And I remember this. I do the same thing with the C and the B, the first letters of this theory. And I remember that the stimulus causes both. So both the arousal and the emotion happen together simultaneously. Canon says that the stimulus causes both together. Next is the Shakhtar theory. It's also called the Shakhtar two-factor theory of emotion. And so we're going to take the same situation. A car is approaching, and under the Shakhtar theory, emotion is experienced in this way. The car is coming down the road. Your heart is pounding, so you're having this biological experience at the same time as a cognitive appraisal of the situation. So your heart is pounding while you are assessing the situation, and you're trying to understand what's happening, and you assess the stimulus. Is this a threatening stimulus? And it happens really quickly. But while your heart is pounding, you assess the stimulus, and then you experience the emotion. And so the definition goes like this. The theory suggests that emotion is experienced by having both a biological response as well as a cognitive interpretation of that experience, and therefore then you have the emotion that follows. And so I'll give you an example, and this is how I remember this. So if you think about you're walking into, like, maybe you're walking up to your front door and you start to open the door and you realize that the door is unlocked. And that immediately starts to make your heart race, and you start to turn the handle and you walk inside and the lights are off and you hear a sound. And your heart is racing while you're trying to assess the situation. Should I be afraid? Is there someone in my house? Am I, is someone, is there a thief in my house? Or is it a surprise party? It's also your birthday. Are they surprising you? Should you be excitedly surprised or, fearfully afraid? And so at this moment of heart racing and assessing the situation, maybe, your friends jump out and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm happily surprised, And so Shakhtar would say that, some of these emotions that we have actually have the same biological response inside, but you have this cognitive interpretation at the same time to figure out what that emotion is. So Shakhtar, I remember my little memory trick for this is to remember the S and the S. The stimulus makes me question, save me? Is there a thief in the house? Or surprise party? And so that's what I remember to help me just remember Shakhtar is the biological arousal is happening at the same time as this cognitive interpretation that therefore then allows me to have the emotion. Next, what we're going to just discuss briefly is some additions to the theories of emotion. And so there are some contributions from a few different people. The first is Zeance and Ledoux, and then a person named Lazarus. And so they're bringing into the conversation just some other things to think about. So according to all three of these people, what they would say is cognition does not have to come before the emotion. And in fact, a lot of times some of these things are occurring without our cognitive assessment, especially if it's in regards to fear or possibly like an extreme dislike or maybe an extreme joy. Maybe there's just something that I don't even have to have this cognitive assessment of. And so the way that this would be explained is that we'll start with Zeance and Ledoux. And so what they would say is the stimulus is coming in. So in through the eyes, maybe it's a visual stimulus is coming in, and it is then taken to the thalamus, which is the sensory switchboard. And the thalamus, now Shakhtar would say that information would go to the visual cortex to be processed and, visually to have that perception of what is this, and then that cognitive experience would happen. But Zeance and Ledoux would say that some, especially if it's fear, would not even go back to the visual cortex, but it would go to the amygdala, and it would just go straight to that fear location in the brain, and that it doesn't even need to have this cognitive process at all. So Zeance and Ledoux would say their theory suggests that some emotions, especially likes, dislikes, or even fears, have automatic responses to the situation without any kind of conscious thinking. So for example, you might feel startled by a sound, but never have to have interpreted what that sound was, but that sound startled you and you felt fear without even having a cognitive assessment of that. And then the last addition, as far as Lazarus goes, Lazarus would say also that there is this unconscious component of emotion and the emotional experience. Lazarus would say that we have the stimulus, and then we have an unconscious cognitive label, that you don't have a conscious cognitive thinking about the experience, where Shakhtar Singer would say you have this like conscious assessment. Lazarus would say it's actually an unconscious cognitive assessment that then produces, after you have this conscious assessment, this unconscious assessment, you would then have the physiological arousal and the emotional experience at the same time. So I'll give you a definition here. Lazarus would say that our brain actually makes an appraisal of the situation, but we're not necessarily conscious that it's occurring. And then we have that afterwards, we have that biological and emotional response, but we're just not aware we're having that process occur. So to end this video, I wanted to bring this chart up onto the screen. This might be a better way for you to just think through what the different theories of emotions are. And essentially what these different psychologists are trying to do is they're just trying to explain the complexity of emotion and when is emotion occurring, because there are components of it. There is a biological experience, there is a cognitive experience, there are behaviors that are occurring, and all the while you have this feeling. And so what is emotion? What's triggering the emotion? When does the emotion occur? And these are the different theories of when is the emotion and what is the emotion. And so I hope that's helpful, and definitely feel free to reach out to me if you have questions.